The mother's hands shook as she clutched a photograph, not evidence, not a piece of trial paperwork, but a school portrait. Her daughter's last smile frozen in time. She had carried it every single day of the trial, waiting for this moment. And now, as the man who killed her child sat just feet away, shackled and silent, she was about to speak words no parent ever imagined saying. Words to their child's killer. The courtroom braced itself. No one breathed, because what happened in the next few minutes would be remembered forever. It began on a warm summer night in a small American town, a place where doors were left unlocked. Kids rode their bikes until dark, and neighbors waved from their porches. A place where a tragedy felt like something that only happened on the evening news, never here. But that night shattered everything. 16-year-old Emily Johnson never made it home. She was last seen walking back from a friend's house, just a few blocks from her door. But in those few blocks, she crossed paths with a young man who had already spiraled into darkness. He wasn't a stranger. He had lived in the same town, attended the same schools. But behind closed doors, his life had been unraveling. Petty crimes, fights, a growing fascination with violence. And on that night, Emily became his target. The details that came out in trial were devastating. He followed her, cornered her, and in an act of brutality that stunned even the most seasoned detectives, he ended her life. Her body was found the next morning, less than a mile from her home. The entire community was shaken. Candlelight vigils filled the streets. Churches overflowed with grief. Parents clutched their children tighter, and the Johnson family's world collapsed into a silence they had never known. When the arrest came, the town erupted with both relief and rage. The suspect, just 19 years old, was led into custody. His face showed no emotion. The trial lasted months. Prosecutors laid out every detail, the timeline, the evidence, the motive. They painted him as calculated, remorseless, someone who took pleasure in control. The defense tried to argue mental instability, a troubled upbringing, desperation. But for the Johnsons, it didn't matter. Nothing could explain why their daughter was gone. Day after day, the parents sat in the courtroom, listening to the horrifying details of their daughter's final moments. They saw the crime scene photos. They heard the 911 call. They endured cross-examinations that reopened every wound. And then the verdict came. Guilty. The word rang out, sealing his fate. But the trial wasn't over. One final step remained, sentencing. And that meant the Johnsons had the right to speak directly to the man who had destroyed their lives. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches. The gallery buzzed with anticipation. The judge cleared his throat. At this time, the court will hear victim impact statements. Emily's mother rose slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice, though cracked with grief, was steady. She walked to the podium, clutching that photograph of her daughter. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at the jury. She looked directly at the man in shackles. "You took my baby girl from me," she said. "You stole her laughter, her future. Every birthday we'll never get to celebrate. I still set a place for her at the table, because part of me can't accept she's gone. You made me a mother without a child, and I want you to see her face every night when you close your eyes." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the reporters lowered their pens. Then Emily's father stood. He was a man who had sat silent through the entire trial, never once showing emotion. But now, his voice thundered through the courtroom. "Look at me," he ordered. The killer raised his head slowly, their eyes locking. "You thought you broke us, but we're still here. You thought we'd be silent, but we'll speak her name louder than you ever imagined. And you'll spend the rest of your life in a cage, hearing her name, knowing you couldn't erase her. Justice may not bring her back, but it will make sure you never take another child from another family." The room was still. The killer's mask of indifference cracked. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickered, not with anger this time, but with something else. Shame, regret, maybe even fear. For the first time, he couldn't hide. The judge's gavel fell. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emily's parents gripped each other's hands. There was no celebration, no smile, because justice doesn't erase grief. It doesn't bring back birthdays or graduations or first dances, but it does send a message. And as the deputies led the killer away, the parents knew their daughter's voice had been heard. Through them, outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But the Johnsons didn't talk about the trial. They didn't talk about the killer. They talked about Emily, her laughter, her kindness, her dreams of becoming a teacher. They vowed to keep her memory alive, not through the details of her death, but through the story of her life. And they did. Scholarships in her name, community programs, advocacy for victims' families. Because while one life was stolen, Emily's parents refused to let her story end in tragedy alone. Courtrooms are meant to deliver justice. But sometimes, the most powerful moments don't come from the judge or the jury. They come from grieving parents, standing tall in the face of unthinkable loss, forcing a killer to confront the lives they destroyed. And in those moments, justice becomes more than a sentence. It becomes a voice that says, "You did not win. We are still here,